Perk up your ears and engage your brain. It's time for Grounded with author and speaker Ryan Dobson.
Hey everybody, welcome to Grounded. I am Ryan Dobson.
Yes, you are.
And I'm sitting with...
Toben Heim.
That's right.
Who just had a birthday.
You did.
Yeah, 41.
Happy birthday.
I think that's a lame birthday, 41. I don't want to offend anybody else out there who's turning 41. But
I agree.
What is 41?
I heard Patton Oswalt talk about this. He said, listen, when you're a kid, first birthday doesn't matter.
Right, because you don't remember it.
But I think he says, 1 through 5 birthday. Then you get a birthday at 10.
Right,
Then you
double digits.
Then you get a birthday at 13.
Right.
Then you get a birthday at 16.
Yep, then 18.
18. 21, and then it's decades after that, 30, 40, 50, 60. But in between...
I'm with him.
Who cares?
Yes, I totally...
Because I turned 41 a couple months ago.
And it's minor. It's not...
People are like, what did you do? I went out with my wife. Yeah.
Joanne's mom made me brisket. That was good.
That's
I dug that.
That's good for a birthday, absolutely.
Yeah, I did.
We had forgotten to tell people who's on the program today.
Ah, man, I can't believe we forgot it.
Good friend of the broadcast, Mark Matlock. Such a just... You know what, I was listening to someone the other day, and now I'm not going to be able to recall it, but they had worked on a book with Mark, and were just talking about how deeply he thinks and really considers all different angles and the best possible way to do things. He is such a genius in the areas of youth ministry. I love talking to him because I know he's not going to give me the same old, same old.
Right.
He's going to be thinking about something very different.
He's a very deep thinker.
More efficient, progressive ways to do things. He is the executive director of Youth Specialties. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Do people know how big of a deal that is?
Well, Youth Specialties is the only organization that really focuses on ministering to youth workers. There are others that have that as part of their makeup, part of their, but Youth Specialties is only dedicated to making sure that youth workers are equipped to do their jobs, and they do a darn good job at it.
Well, and that's what he's thinking about every single day.
Right.
What can we do to better equip youth workers to spread the love of Jesus to the youth?
Yeah, it's incredible.
Awesome.
Yeah.
He speaks nationally all over the place and at youth specialty events, and he's got Planet Wisdom student conferences. He's the author of several books, including Wisdom On series, Living a Life That Matters, Don't Buy the Lie, so many others. He has developed the Real World Parents Seminars. It's a grassroots movement resourcing youth workers to impact families in their local communities. Again, think about that.
Yeah.
So it's getting local youth workers who have been trained by him and by Youth Specialties to then help parents be better parents and be better informed and more equipped to parent their children so that it goes hand in hand with local youth workers.
You know what's cool is this theme comes up for us over and over again.
Yeah, baby.
We've got Kara Powell that we've had on a number of times.
Andy Brainer.
We've
Sean
had
McDowell.
all of these folks talking about you have to get parents involved in raising, nurturing, teaching, exhorting their kids.
Yep.
And Mark is just an incredible voice. Not only does he have a passion for that, but he has an ability to communicate it that's very winsome, that doesn't make you feel like a jerk as a parent for not doing it, but gives you that encouragement.
I wish Mark lived near us.
Oh, well, he cans, right? I mean,
I know, baby, yeah. He pressure cans, and he's got a vacuum sealer, all the things that I like. Engineer Mike's already laughing. He's already laughing about that. I get it. Yeah, it's all right. I'm nerdy about that. You know what came in the mail? 2 things.
Endless fun.
Absolutely. I love it. Well, Toben, I've been in and out of youth ministry for a long, long time.
Yeah.
First as a participant, Sunday school, junior high, high school, college. I've been done a lot of youth speaking, and it's changed over the years. There was a long time where there was no youth pastor. It was just one service.
Right.
And then there was a little bit of Sunday school happening, and now every church has got a youth pastor, and by and large, most have a program and different things, and yet it's still rapidly changing. Our guest today is Mark Matlock. He's been in the youth ministry industry for a long time. He's with Youth Specialties, and we're having to look at it in a much, much different way. Mark, growing up, I was 10 in 1980. I had the whole 80s boom of youth ministry where it became more and more about games and entertainment and, covering your youth ministry room with plastic and having food fights. And, moving away from, doctrine. My early youth ministry experience we had a thing called the sword drill, where everybody brought their Bible. I mean,
brother.
You brought your Bible to church. Everybody did. And they'd say Psalm 36:4, and you'd, open your Bible and, go to the page and stand up, and they'd call on you and you'd, give that verse. I don't see a lot of that happening anymore. And with your experience, I mean,
Ryan, I think that together we can bring that back.
I'd love to bring it back. Yeah, I'd be okay with that. I talk to kids today and I go, I don't know how you do it. I talk about abstinence and I talk about purity, and I just think, how do you do that with all that's being bombarded in your world via the internet and TV? I'm not trying to paint myself as old. It's just such a different world, and I feel for the youth pastor. I think you've got to be just hanging on by a thread, trying to, you're talking about, home life and marriage and relationships and purity and abstinence. And instead of being like behavioral police, trying to teach character, you're in the world, you're talking with youth pastors all the time. How hard is it today to run a youth group? And then you've got these, the helicopter parents hovering in and getting in your business and telling you what to do, and you got to appease them and appease your head pastor and work within a budget. It just seems overwhelming.
Well, there's so much going on right now in our world, that's causing change, not just within our churches, but business, Wall Street, government, art, everything is in a state of flux. We have media companies and newspaper, news organizations that are all trying to figure out, how do we fit in this new world that we're living in? And so it's no surprise that youth ministry finds itself in kind of the same place. And I think if we look at kind of the trajectory of youth ministry is really not that old in the United States. I think at the first Christian youth ministry kind of parachurch organization was Christian Endeavor, and they just celebrated their 125th birthday. And if you look at actual youth ministry as like a position in the church, it's not that old of a position. And so we're still learning along the way. But I think what youth ministry has always been about relationships at its heart. And I think what's getting harder is, I think the nature of relationships has changed to some extent. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, definitely. Mark, let me ask you this. We had John Lynch on the program a while ago, and we talked about, as parents, getting away from fear-based parenting, that parenting that says, I don't want my kids to have sex, I don't want them to, it's all about behavior, not about them as a person. And he's trying to teach us to get back into character parenting. If you can train your children to have a good character, the behavior will follow. It's not about behavior modification, it's about character modification. But I'm wondering, you get a kid that shows up on a Wednesday night, maybe on a Sunday, you're catching them for 30, 45 minutes. Is it a stopgap? Is it a Band-Aid? Or can you really get that, can you teach doctrine? Can you teach character? I can't assume that you can reach everybody, but what's that medium ground to where you can get kids coming and yet you can still teach them something that's going to be with them the rest of their lives?
Well, there's a report that came out in, I think it was 2001, called Hardwired to Connect. Mm-hmm. And it basically was a report put together by a bunch of people that work with adolescents, primarily in the areas of, sociology, medical care, psychological care of teenagers and adolescents. And they were looking at kind of this wave of kids that were becoming fragmented, and there's so much medication going on, and depression was increasing, and violence was increasing. And so they sat down and they did this symposium that was sponsored by YMCA and Dartmouth Medical School. And this group of people came down and they basically said that we are biologically, that modern neuroscience is showing us that we are biologically hardwired to connect to spiritual meaning and to other people. And what's happening in our society is a breakdown of authoritative community. And I think that's, what I'm hearing in your, saying, wow, you only have 45 minutes with them on the weekend. How do you teach doctrine? Well, those things that we've done in the past in youth ministry worked when those things were done in the context of true community. And the reality is that our community is so fractured today that when just making a speech on a weekend or giving a lesson to a teenager isn't going to have the same impact as it does when it's couched in the context of relationships. I mean, how do you develop character? As I'm just thinking about my own life. How did I choose some of the qualities that I really wanted to work on in my life and work off the rough edges of certain things in my life? It was because I saw somebody that was an example of that, and I drew near to them. And sometimes they were distant relationships. I didn't know them very well, but I admired them. But most of them were people that were close to me that I was in relationship with. They'll say, how do I get this? Show me where I'm not correct in my heart or in my mind. And that requires a level of community that just is hard to find today.
You know, the thing that strikes me, I was at a church in Phoenix for a year, learned an enormous amount. That church, 13th fastest growing church in the U.S., had one youth pastor for senior high, one youth pastor for junior high. I think the senior high guy had maybe like 10 or 12 interns, and they had 200 plus students on a weekend. And, how do you – because I remember when I was – a student, man, I had a really close relationship with my youth pastor, but we didn't have 200 kids coming, and he had twice as many volunteers back then as this guy has today. So how do you develop a sense of community when you've got one overworked youth pastor, 10 volunteers that you can sort of count on, and 200 kids showing up on a weekend?
Right. Well, and that's exactly where maybe youth ministry strategically has failed. I think that there are a lot of youth pastors that, and we're all guilty of this to some extent, who kind of believe that we were the main show, we were the focus, we were the center or the hub. And as I look at successful youth ministries and have over the last 2 decades of traveling the country and being on the ground with youth workers everywhere, the most successful youth ministries are those youth pastors that aren't just being the center point, but they are basically investing in other adult leaders that are then investing in their kids. In fact, some of the best youth workers I know don't spend a lot of time with teenagers every week. They maybe have a handful, just like you were talking about, Toben, a handful that they come in contact with on a higher touch level and relationally.
Right.
But they're investing in the lives of other leaders that are then able to invest in the lives of teenagers. So there's kind of they're leveraging their relational surface area. I mean, if Jesus only took on 12,
right.
What do we think we can do? You know,
isn't that a shock? I mean, you look at the number of. I mean, it used to be if you wanted to work with students, you didn't get a youth ministry degree, right? But now a lot of schools are offering youth ministry degrees.
Well, and this is excellent. We've got some of the best trained youth workers ever. They're theologically reflective. They're teaching their kids truth, and they can be a source of that. And so that's an exciting thing for where we at. I think some of the forms have gotten a little muddy because, like I said, some of the forms were built back in that time when there was authoritative community. And so the youth pastor kind of being the center of things and just being an add-on to what the rest of the community was contributing to the life of a student, that was great and that was adequate, but it's just not enough now.
Now, Mark, you talk about the authoritative community, and I think family when I think that. I think that you've got top down.
It all starts there,
yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It starts there. So in the models that are working in youth ministry, are you getting the parents more involved, letting them know what you're teaching, or is the head pastor, is it going, like at my church, oftentimes what they're preaching in main service is there's a variation of that going on in college. There's a variation going on in high school, junior high, all on down the line, so that when you're in the car going home, the discussion will all be on the same thing.
Yeah, the church is in sync from a message standpoint.
Is that a better model? Is that something that you'd like to see happen more often?
Well, I think that it's when you can pull it off successfully, it works. I mean, I've been a part of churches that have done that. Well, my church right now tried to do that. The problem was there got to be certain redundancies that actually made kids start going, okay, I'm hearing this like too many different places.
Yeah.
And
sure.
some of the themes that were chosen weren't necessarily designed to fold into the life of a student, and so you have to be, and there's some churches I'm sure that execute it really well. It's a very challenging thing to do.
Yeah.
But it's a step in the right direction. I think the bigger thing is realizing how the role of family changes in the life of an adolescent. If you take a look at all of your hero movies, okay, I just saw Captain America this weekend, and, but there's been a ton of them this summer, right? We had Thor, we had Green Lantern, and they all followed the same kind of arc. You have somebody who's a nobody, who's not really all that special, and they receive a call, an invitation into a greater story, a greater opportunity. To do something that is beyond their current ability, more than they could ever hope or imagine. Then they go through some failures, usually as they're trying to refine their character and their identity with this new power. But there's somebody usually that comes into their life that helps them. And that person is usually not a mom or dad. In fact, in most of our hero stories, mom and dad are dead. Think about it. Batman, parents are dead. Spider-Man, parents are dead. He's living with his aunt and uncle. Superman, parents died on Krypton. And so when you think about it, almost all of our hero stories, the parents are really non-existent. And I think that from a cultural standpoint, the reason for that is that as we go into this level of becoming an adult and finding our own identity, no matter how great of a foundation our parents laid in our lives, we have to somehow find our own way. And an outside voice can usually accelerate that growth. And that's the unique role, I believe, of youth ministry today, is that mom and dads have done a lot of work to lay a foundation. They're still important. I'm not saying that they're not. But their voice and influence diminishes, and outside voices increase to reinforce those things or to take them in different directions. And so that idea of giving your kids some cognitive autonomy during this time and giving them a little space to think on their own is really important. Otherwise, we'll miss them.
Sure. Well, and that's why it's so important to trust your youth pastor, to know what he believes, to know what he's teaching. Because if you as a parent have been doing your job and your goal is to let them go, to be autonomous people, to make their own decisions, to make wise choices, and you've been teaching them character, there does come a time, and I'm sure you've heard this, Mark, where you talk to a parent afterwards and they go, I say all these same things, but they don't listen to me.
Oh, absolutely.
And I tell parents...
I have two teenagers in my own home right now.
Yes.
And people in my church go, oh, Mark, you're like the teen whisperer. You help everybody with their kids. You're going to have an easy time with your kids. And I'm like, I'm not going to hold my breath because I'm the outsider in the lives of their kids. I'm the parent in the relationship and in the story of my children. Yep. And so my relationship to them is very different. And I've experienced the same thing. I mean, just over this summer, my kids have been profoundly impacted spiritually by the lives of some people that they've come in contact with through our youth ministry. And I can see this acceleration of things in their lives spiritually and how it's playing out in their life. It's not that they haven't been around all this stuff. I mean, the influential people that they've had access to in their life because of the traveling that we've done and the relationships we've had is phenomenal. It's off the charts. But it's those outside voices that really have the ability to leverage things. And we need to make sure that as we're building our youth ministries that we're making ourselves available to be those voices for other people's children too. And that's what I would challenge all of your listeners to do, is some of them may not even have children, but even if you have children or you don't, you can be influenced in the life of somebody else's child during this really critical time of life. And the youth pastor at your church or the youth director, whoever it is, they need bodies to be those people because they can only do so much.
The thing that's interesting, Mark, about especially larger churches, I mean, you've got smaller churches where the youth ministry is being run by volunteers. There's no professional youth pastor. But for the most part, youth pastors get in the game because they love kids, right? I mean, they're young. They're young and idealistic, and they go to school and they get their youth ministry degree, and they're going to make a difference in the life of teenagers. And then they get into some of these larger churches, and they realize that their ministry is really to other people who love kids. Do you see a bit of a shock or a, what's the right word for it? Just kind of a wake-up call when they get in there and realize, oh, I've got 200 kids. I'm not going to be able to minister to them. I need 20 volunteers that are really passionate, and if I do it right, I'm going to spend all my time with other adults. Do you see that happening, and do you see youth ministers kind of rebelling against that and saying, I really want to work with kids? And so do you see a movement maybe even to smaller churches or smaller forms of youth ministry so that youth pastors can actually continue to engage in the lives of students?
You hit on a really good point, Toben. I've seen a lot of youth pastors struggle with this because you feel like you're giving your job away and somehow you're making yourself less valuable to the church. And, it's not something that I've seen youth pastors try to give away the ministry to adult volunteers and leverage that, and the church actually fight them on it too.
Right.
The church, unfortunately, youth ministry is just very, very misunderstood in the context of the whole church, and I agree there are some, people that really challenge, the validity of youth ministry, and I think there are some reasonable, arguments there, but I don't know that it's completely youth ministry's fault as much as it is the context, that it's placed in. You've got a young youth pastor who's just starting out, who's never probably been in a management level kind of position before, and now he's being thrown these really different kind of challenges of self-management, trying to understand how to prioritize time, what actually is a valuable return on the investment the church is making in the program, and how do I define the right metrics, Sometimes churches just want to see kids on campus. Sometimes they just want to see them converted or baptized or whatever. And then so what happens to deeper spiritual formation and discipleship? Those are sometimes harder things to track and measure. So it's a systemic problem that youth ministers face. All of us are challenged in this area. And then we have the whole challenge of, you come back. I watched it this summer. Our youth pastor came back two youth pastors came back from beach camp, and people are slapping them on the back, going, "Hey, how was vacation?" And I'm thinking, you have no idea what these two men just went through.
But isn't that
last week?
Isn't that an interesting situation though that youth pastors end up in? Is the metrics that they're given by their churches. I would sit in pastors' meetings, and the questions would go to the youth pastor: how many kids did you have? Did you have anybody accept Christ? How many people did you sign up for baptism? Those were real metrics that the church was imposing. How many kids came to game night? How many kids are in small group? It's this numbers game, and the youth pastor is largely relational. That's why they get into it.
So, Mark, if you're a young youth pastor out there and you're trying to talk to a head pastor or the board, and you're saying, here are the things that are crucially important for youth, what are you telling them? Let's say that I'm a new youth pastor, I'm out of college, I'm 25, I'm wet behind the ears, and you're going to say, here's your building blocks. Here's square one. This is the most important thing you can start with your youth, and here's how to present it to someone who really is just thinking numbers. How many kids do you have, and are they being baptized?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is seeing your job not just as ministering to youth, but also helping educate the larger church family about what the possibilities of ministering missionally to the adolescents in your community, what those are. The reality is if all of our youth ministries were operating at full steam, we probably would still not reach the majority of teenagers that are in our world today. And when you consider that most of us aren't running at full steam right now, we have this large group of teenagers that aren't even being reached. So casting vision before the whole church, really getting executive leadership, whether that be in the form of an elder board or senior pastor or whoever those people are, to really buy into the vision of what youth ministry can be. But I would recommend that they read Doug Field's The First 2 Years book. I've talked to everybody out there, and I don't think there's a better book out there for somebody who's just starting out in youth ministry, trying to get your head around the challenges that you're going to face to help you orient toward a path of success within the body of Christ.
Is that going to disillusion people, or is it really going to give them the tools to get the job done?
No, it gives you tools. It prepares you. And you know what? It's not about disillusionment. Sometimes it's just about inoculating. Because, anytime that you're young, you're idealistic. And sometimes you don't realize the kind of challenges, that you're going to face. I know when I was young in youth ministry, people would pat me on my back. And all my life, they've been patting my back saying, man, God's going to use you in big ways. You're awesome. You're great. You're better than the pastor, You hear those things, and you actually start believing a lot of it, not realizing that they might be calling the pastor right after they say that to you and go, hey, we got a problem we got to take care of with this guy. This person isn't doing well. And sometimes it's not that they're trying to shoot you down. It's that they're really trying to help you improve. I did a study with Dave Kinnaman at Barna Research on parents' perceptions of youth pastors, and it was really interesting to see the things. First of all, most of the parents loved their youth worker dearly, believed in them, but felt that some youth pastors, hurt themselves in some ways because they weren't open to constructive criticism in how they could maybe manage themselves better and things. So it was really interesting. That is
fascinating. I hate to do this, Toben. We're going to cut into the interview here and break. We're talking with Mark Matlock of Youth Specialties and Planet Wisdom. So wise. We're going to pick that up again tomorrow, but we will start posting resources from Youth Specialties and Mark Matlock at groundedradio.com. And